I've had the Polygon Siskiu T6 for almost 6 months now, and I've gotten to know the bike well over that time. If you're not familiar with the bike, the Siskiu T6 is Polygon's entry-level mid-travel trail bike. It retails for $1,699, which is low enough to make any bike snob scoff. But I found this bike to be plenty capable for its low price tag. There's always a honeymoon period when it comes to a new bike, and over time you'll start to feel its flaws. Now, I build, ride, and review a lot of nice higher-end bikes, so I'm spoiled in that regard, and I'm always grateful for that blessing. So thank you to all of you for watching and being a part of this journey. And despite that, I really get excited when someone hands me a budget-friendly bike like the T6. Cheap bikes are easier to abuse, and if they're built and spec'd properly, they'll give you years of enjoyment. This is the cheapest Siskiu T in the series, and in fact, it's one of the cheapest full suspension mountain bikes you could buy. First, let's talk about the sizing. Now, I'm 5'9" or 175 centimeters tall. Using the size calculator at Bikes Online, I was recommended a size medium 29er. I found the fit to be ideal for my frame. The standover height was just right. The low 400mm seat tube allowed me to slam the stock 150mm dropper. Now that helps the seat get out of the way on those really steep downs and jumps. I expected the generous 460mm reach to feel stretched out while I was riding seated, but that steep seat tube angle gets you in a comfortable riding position. The 170mm cranks were appropriately spec'd for my height. The Siskiu is a pretty low-slung bike. Some bikes feel like you're perched up on the top of them, and others feel like you're in between the wheels. The T6 has that between the wheels feel, which gives it a lot of stability at high speed. But it also makes the bike more prone to pedal strikes when pedaling through technical terrain. Ooh. I'll get more into that later in the video. Let's touch upon the ride characteristics of the bike and how the components play into the performance of the bike. I get a lot of questions about the climbing ability of the T6. It's a heavy bike out of the box, coming in at a hefty 36.8 pounds. I converted the wheels to tubeless, which involves removing the tubes and installing tubeless valves and sealant. That alone saved about a pound of weight. If you ride frequently, going tubeless improves the comfort and handling by allowing you to run lower air pressure, while also giving you puncture protection. The geometry of this bike makes it a good climber. On seated climbs, there was no discernible pedal bob. The frame design is very balanced. The front wheel stays planted on climbs, and it maintains traction really well. Out of the saddle in difficult sections, the suspension was a little more active. That certainly helped with the traction, but I had to be careful about pedal strikes. Even with that said, I've cleaned sections that I've never cleaned in the past on the first try with the T6.
You gotta be kidding me. Wow.
I even cleaned unfamiliar technical sections blind during my time in Arizona. I did not expect to even have a chance with this bike, but the grippy tires and fairly high hub engagement really helped here. Now the V-Snap WCE tires are heavy and soft, and that makes them a double-edged sword. On difficult climbs, these tires were like suction cups. They stuck to whatever I rode over. And to be clear, these are enduro and downhill tires, two disciplines that do not prioritize climbing. There is give and take with these tires. The extra weight is a factor, but more so, the soft rubber made the climbs more tiring. The soft rubber is meant to give maximum grip in steep conditions found on downhill and enduro tracks.
There we go.
Racers pay a premium for those types of tires, and I never slipped a tire on the climbs, or the descents for that matter. If that's a concern, keep in mind that tires are a wear item, and that soft rubber will wear down quickly. As a result, those tires will get faster as the tread wears down. In the meantime, you'll certainly build your fitness. In some instances where the climbs were less than interesting, I was wishing for more gears. I found myself using the biggest gears on the cassette frequently. When I changed out the tires to a lighter, less aggressive set, and by less aggressive I'm talking about the specialized Butcher Eliminator combo, which is still a very aggressive combo, the changes made a big difference. I went from using the biggest gears to using the smaller gears on the cassette. I'll go into more detail in the next T6 video where we actually do some upgrades. If you want to see how that turns out and more content like that, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified. And while you're at it, hit that like button if you're enjoying this video. I found the 10-speed drivetrain to be adequate in most situations. There is still a good amount of range. I've done some steep climbs with a 42-tooth gear, and if I can do it, it's more than possible. The T6 really shines when pointed downhill. The low bottom bracket and overall geometry gives the bike a really stable feel at high speeds while still retaining some playfulness. This was refreshing to experience on a 29er. The suspension components really shine in bumpy descents. Here the bike soaked up small hits and maintained traction and control at levels that I would not have expected at this price point. This has to do as much with the frame's kinematics as it does with the shock and the fork. During hard standing sprints, the bike did have a noticeable bob, which I attribute to the X-Fusion shock and the lack of adjustment. I was able to reduce that by running 20% sag instead of the recommended 30%, and this gave me a bike that had a more poppy feel and really woke up on smoother flow trails. I had no issues with the fork. I ran 20% sag and about 5 clicks of compression, which was still supple but supportive considering the fork. Both suspension bits are very basic, but they've held up for the last 6 months, which is more than I can say for some expensive shocks I've owned. And the brakes? I really can't complain. Stopping power is better than you would expect from an entry-level brake set. And modulation was surprisingly good. The brakes seemed to get better the more I rode the bike. They may not be the most powerful brakes out there, but they are one of the best budget brake options on the market. It's only been 6 months, but the frame and the part spec have proved to be reliable so far. My time on the T6 was spent mostly on rough technical trails. And that wasn't entirely by choice, it was simply a function of bad weather. But during that time, the parts held up well. The shock and the fork still operate smoothly, the brakes have had no issues, and the drivetrain only needed a slight adjustment, which is normal. The frame is still quiet and all pivots are smooth. Even the wheels managed to stay true despite all the square edge impacts that they took. I really like this bike. I'm trying my hardest not to make this video an infomercial for the T6, but I'm sitting here looking at a $1,699 full suspension trail bike, and I'm talking about a $1,699 MSRP. It's really hard to say anything bad about this bike, but like anything, there are strengths and weaknesses. If you're looking to get started on a full suspension mountain bike and you're on a budget, you'll have an already proven platform in the Siskiu T series. It's a capable climber and an excellent descender. It feels incredibly balanced and leans smoothly into corners. I found the bike to be very confidence-inspiring. The components are all proven and reliable, if not a little heavy, and they give enough performance to get most riders through most trails. The main negatives are the slow rolling tires and perhaps the heavy wheel set. Those two parts contribute to the overall stock weight, but keep in mind that heavy bikes are pretty much what you get at this lower price point. It's not unusual to get a bike weighing as much as this one for $1,000 more even. But weight has become less of a factor in the trail category in general. From a geometry perspective, the low bottom bracket may be problematic for people that ride technical chunky climbs. But then again, in the end, the Siskiu Trail platform is a great starting point for a great experience in mountain biking. This is a bike you can grow into, and I regularly encounter Siskiu owners, both new and experienced, that adore their bikes. And in the end, user experience trumps all. I hope you enjoyed this leg of my journey. Thanks for watching.